when they told me, man, I really liked what you wrote because because you were able to crystallize you were able to crystallize the kind of research that we do and the kind of like clinical kaboom stuff that we do into words and language that people understand. It really wasn't until that happened that I thought, like, you know what? Because that's what I wanted to do. That's what I've really wanted to. You want to write stuff that people read and get something from.
So my time at Johns Hopkins was incredible. And I've gone on record in saying it wasn't because of the work. No offense. It's just that I'm not a science guy. However, I worked with some of the best people in the world. People I still call friends and family. Today's guest is somebody who was essentially a big brother, the one and only Patrick Smith. Patrick and I connected because we're both diehard sports fans. So whenever there was like breaking news, I would always go to his office and like, hey man, did you hear this? Did you hear that? Etc. He also helped me understand how to make the job fun, right? As far as writing about the medicine and finding these opportunities to learn about the great things that the doctors were doing. And he was somebody who advocated for me to upper management. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited for you to hear my conversation. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen, Patrick Smith. All right, ladies and gentlemen, on today's episode, I am so excited because I got a good friend of mine, somebody who, when I was at Johns Hopkins Medicine, he was the person that I could go to about everything. One, I had somebody in the office to talk sports with. So that was a plus. But then when I had some ideas and I needed to tie it to real life or I didn't understand the medicine part of it, he could break it down for me. Or simply when I just needed to vent, he was always there, never hesitated, always spoke up for me. And that's the one and only, the Patrick Smith. Patrick, how you doing today?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm doing great, man. I'm so glad to be with you.
Man,
I want to check a box now. I've been on breaking through glass ceilings.
Oh man, come on now. You got a lot of boxes that you've checked out. I can't wait to talk about it, man. But before we get started, how you been? I know it's been wow. So, what 2020? This is the last time we like saw each other. No, yeah, 2020 or 2021, maybe in the flesh.
I think you very kindly dropped everything when I was like, Brian, man, I need a headshot. Quick, I need a professional headshot. We met over it in the middle of the pandemic. I think we met over it in Lake Montebello, and like you took my picture. And I'm like trying to. It was sweat, I'm like trying to. It was a hot day, but anyway, I think that was the last time we were actually together. Though we only live across town from each other. So.
I know, right? We're gonna definitely fix that soon. But how you been?
We are because Camden Yards is close to both of us. I've been great, man. Life is, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I have everything. I'm so happy. This book that's coming out here just came out last week. It's something we worked on for a long time. Just things are good, man. I just finished up a stint of doing some speech writing for some of the executive types at Johns Hopkins Medicine, and that was terrific. There's really a lot of new blood and new ideas and stuff. So it's I feel like I just got everything in life, man. I hope you're doing well too. I see you living the dream, man.
I'm blessed, man. And one of the many reasons why I love doing this podcast is, one, selfishly to reconnect and have an excuse to talk to my friends, but unselfishly to show them off to the world. Being able to, show everybody who I'm connected to and all the great things that y'all doing. So I'm super excited, to show everybody why. Like, when I tell people I worked at Johns Hopkins, they're like, oh, really? How was it? And I said, well, honestly, it was like one of the best places ever. And it sure wasn't the work for me. I mean, I was terrible in science, but you can not understand the work, but you can work with a great group of people who can just make your life amazing. And you are included in that group. So
That means the world, Brian. I appreciate that a lot. And I'm nobody's idea of a scientist either. Um, I mean, I'm a writer, and I think I told you, I love to learn.
mhm.
And since this is we, we live in Baltimore, and in Baltimore, Johns Hopkins is kind of the king, right?
Yep.
And so you kind of adapt your skills a little bit to what the market needs, and so that's just that's so you learn how to read a science journal and learn how to untangle all the kind of really really dense words and dense sentences and passive voice and all the stuff that scientists do in their writing. Um, and then try to make it palatable and interesting because it's fascinating stuff. If
Mhm.
you just tell somebody, like, dude, they just did XYZ, like that is cool. But if you go, if you tell it like a scientist or a doctor tells it, it doesn't sound as much fun. But yeah.
No, that's facts. Let's start with education. You went East Carolina University in Towson. When did you know communications was for you?
Well, I think, I think writing has always been kind of my I don't know how to say it exactly. It's kind of the cornerstone of everything. And I thought that, and so I was at East Carolina and at Towson, I was an English major. And somebody told me early on, I think I was a freshman at ECU, and somebody said, well, because I said I want to go into journalism, and they said, think about English, because if you take up journalism, they'll teach you how to write a news story. But if you take up English, they'll teach you how to write, and you can
Mhm.
and news stories can become part of that stuff. But other things too. So I always figured that if I didn't if I didn't wind up in trouble somewhere, uh, then I would somehow try to make a living as a writer. And yeah, I managed. I was a bad student. We've talked about that before. Just I didn't really know how to learn and things like that. I managed to somehow get into college, and then managed to somehow graduate from college. Had a lot of fun, uh, but yeah, I mean, just I always just thought writing was going to be what I did, and it's kind of what I've stuck to for my whole career. Thank
And
goodness.
now you've done some cool stuff though, like writing, a lot of press for in politics, and we talked about medicine, but you talk about the political experience.
Yeah, I started as a newspaper reporter at the Dundalk Eagle.
Mhm.
That was my first job out of Towson, and I was pretty sure I was going to get hired by the Washington Post, or what I mean, maybe the Baltimore Sun. And I remember my buddy had been a really good friend of mine, Matt McLaughlin, who he had been a sports writer at Towson. He'd covered Towson basketball, so like the years that they went to the NCAA tournament, which was a very long time ago. Um, so he covered him and stuff. So he graduated like a semester before me, and he called me up and he was like, "Hey, Smitty, I got a job in my field, in our field. I'm a writer. I'm a reporter." And I was like, "Wow, dude, where?" And he said, "The Dundalk Eagle." And I was like, "Oh, that's great." Okay.
Mhm.
And then truly 6 months later, I was like, "Yo, Matt, is the Eagle hiring?" Because I need a job. And yeah, so I got that. And naturally the sports beat was already taken because Matt was there. So
Mhm.
they gave me crime and courts and politics.
Okay.
And politics politics in Dundalk and East Baltimore is more interesting than sports in East Baltimore. And so I got to cover some pretty interesting stuff, the county council and the city council and in Annapolis and in Washington. Um, and I interviewed the county executive, the Baltimore County executive, and a couple days, and he liked the story that I wrote. And a couple of days later, his press guy called and said, "Hey, how'd you like to come and work for us?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, it was. I mean, it was an incredible honor, you know." But I said, "Well, I appreciate it, but I really see myself as a newspaper man." And they're paying me. The old man at the paper is paying me $12,000 every year. And the guy was like, "I think we can do a little better than that." and I said, "Really?" So I think I made like $30,000. Honestly, it could have been $1 million. I thought,
Right.
what? I went from 12 to 30. Like what? So I didn't realize how underpaid I was at the paper.
That's so funny. I love that you said that because people are going to listen to this, and that's the thing that a lot of times people don't think is they'll know. Okay, I'll ask that question. Before just turning it down. Like, well, how much are you going to pay me?
Yeah.
And you can see clearly you was grateful. Like, it wasn't like you were rude, but you was grateful, enjoying the job that you're doing. But now he's like, well, how about we give you some more?
Yeah. And he was, I was young. I mean, I think I was maybe 25 or 26. And he he was patient with me, and I think he probably I think he probably thought, like, this poor kid, he didn't know up from down. Maybe I don't know, maybe I don't really want to hire him if he's that green. But no, he did hire me, and it was I learned a lot. I learned a ton in that world. And it's the thing that I had that I learned first, though, was that suddenly all the friends I had, or not all the friends, but a lot of the friends that I had when I was a reporter weren't calling me back anymore. I remember there was this dude from the police union who used to call me like once a week, and he'd say, like, "Hey, you want to go get a beer?" Or, "Hey, you want to hang out? You want to do this and that?" And what I didn't realize was, oh, wait a minute, he's doing that because I'm a reporter, not because he thinks I'm a cool guy. And so that was that was an eye opener that I thought, like, oh, I see. I mean, it sounds so obvious, Brian, but if you don't know it, and if you don't have the experience, you just assume people's motives are what they appear to be, right? So, I hung with a couple of Baltimore County executives and learned a lot. And then I got invited to apply for a job with Senator Mikulski in Washington. And that was down like in in the Hart office building, which is right next to the U.S. Capitol. And that was just a spectacular experience. And, I didn't want to do it for very long because it's a terrible commute, and the stress is like no other stress in the world
for real?
that I've experienced. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough. And plus, I live, like I said, you and I don't live far apart. And so driving, and I wasn't allowed to take the train to DC. So I had to drive back and forth every day. So it was
really?
Yeah. Because, you never know how late the Senate is going to go when they're in session.
True.
It's not like, that's not the kind of job where, 5 o'clock you walk out and go, okay, see you later, everybody. I think I did that the first couple days, and the senator was walking in. She saw me walking out with my bag over my shoulder, and she was like, turn around, dude. Sit down, turn around, we ain't done. It's like, okay. So, I did freelance and stuff after that. I wrote for the National Governors Association, worked with a lot of governors, and politics was really great. And I was I'd been kind of, one of the reasons my college grades weren't so good is because I was paying more attention to being an activist than I was a student. So we were doing, we were protesting and making noise about, things like apartheid in Central America, and a lot of the issues of the 80s. That's when I went to college. And so we were kind of, rabble rousers and stuff. So that was always kind of my roots. And so that's why it felt natural to go right into politics, from working at the paper.
I'm gonna say something that could be taken as controversial. Okay. And if you tell me take this out, I will.
No, yeah.
But the one thing that I've always loved about you, was when we worked together, we're talking, woo, around, the days when Alton Sterling got killed and
Yeah.
Philando Castile.
Yeah.
And between you and Justin, and if y'all watching, y'all can clearly see I'm black and Patrick's white. Y'all always made sure just to do mental checks on me. And it's something I always appreciated. And, I definitely want to say that publicly. It wasn't a thing where it was cool. You just say it because it was cool, or it was trendy, excuse me. Y'all always made sure that, and it made me feel good about coming to work and feeling like, okay, I got friends, not just coworkers, And,
Yeah.
and it's the reason why we're talking right now, So it's like when you say like you was being an activist, it's not like, oh, really? It's like, of course you was. Like, this is what you do, and you remain true to yourself, and I'm pretty sure she won't get mad if I say this. Like me and Chinapa would always talk about how you've always like treated us with fairness and respect,
Well, I mean, we're all people. I appreciate it. And I don't even know how to thank you. It means the whole world, truly, because to me, there is nothing more important than that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whatever is different about us is pretty minor. And,
Facts.
I mean, you and I could chop it up for hours and hours, and that's a topic that would never come up. You know what I mean? Just because of who we are. And
Right.
just because, that would be about the last thing that would come up in a casual conversation. But, just, where we live and the times we live in, it's just important to, it's important for me to, let my friend check in on my friends and let them know that whatever they, if I can help at all. Because here's the other thing, right? I told you a minute ago what a terrible student I was. And I understand, I think you and I have talked about this. I understand kind of I understand now the luxury that I enjoyed and didn't know that I enjoyed as somebody who could get a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth chance, just because of how I look and who I am. Not who I am, because of how I look. And that's not true for everybody. And so, anybody who doesn't acknowledge that, I think, like, I don't know, they're missing something pretty important. So anyway, man, I appreciate that.
Appreciate you, brother.
That's it. That to me, that's like, that makes me know, okay, I can rest easy at night, knowing
Facts.
friends. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks, what up? It's your boy Blue Magic, owner of For Your Wear and one half of the Mixed Tag Show. Now, I know you've seen the announcement from some of your favorite podcasts in wrestling. I've decided to expand my business to become a vendor so that people from the wrestling community have a better way to communicate with some of their favorites. So check out foryourwear.com and see if your favorite podcast or wrestler has partnered up with me. If not, let them know that they should. Also, if you're looking for a vendor for your merchandise, reach out to me at Blue Magic Grind, spell how it's found on Twitter or Instagram, or at ForYourWear, FORURWEAR, on Twitter and on Instagram. Shout out to Brian H. Waters and Breaking Through Glass Ceilings. Their merchandise are already up, and they're one of the first ones that supported, so go support them. All right? Peace.
When did you decide, like, you wanted to get into healthcare? Because it's a whole different... So it's a lot of things that, are sort of the same, but it's also, a lot of differences.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, kind of like I was saying, you adapt to the market. Like, I didn't want to drive to DC every day because, in DC, there's jobs falling off the trees, communications jobs that people, I mean, the people around here would do for not much money because they're cool jobs, but they're in Washington, so if you're not feeling like the commute. So yeah, you just kind of bend a little bit to learn and make yourself marketable. I had been after I left politics, I worked for nonprofits. And I worked for the Red Cross and I worked for the United Way. I was the communications director at the United Way, like Central Maryland. And, it was cool, but I was looking for something a little more grassroots, a little more hands-on, a little more direct service.
Okay.
And so a job opened up at an agency that that United Way supported, and it was called the People's Community Health Centers. And again, I thought, like, man, this is a cool way to kind of get back to the activism and what's important, kind of because along the way I tried working. I thought, like, all right, now it's time to make some money after the nonprofit stuff. And I went to work for an ad agency, and that lasted like less than a year because my clients were just awful.
Oh,
And like,
man.
I was promoting stuff that I didn't believe. And I just thought I can't do that. So the people, when People's Community Health Centers came up, they were founded by the Black Panthers in the 60s and early 70s right here in Baltimore on Greenmount Avenue at like 30th Street. And like a lot of other kind of coalitions with, like kind of activist coalitions. So they had this really wonderful kind of rich and radical roots history that I thought sounded great. They provided healthcare for the poorest people, really the most impoverished and most underserved folks in town. They had a hard go of it because we at People's had a hard go of it. I was there for 7 or 8 years, and we were like broker than broke. And,
Oh, wow.
And I started to, after a while, it just kind of wore me down. My heart was always with the work and with the job and with the people that we served. But, it was like they started having some pretty bad financial problems. So that's when I took the Hopkins job. And that was a mind blower because I was like, I was coming from a place where we were like, hey, don't use that whole pencil. You know what I mean? Don't sharpen that pencil too much because we're broke. It was worrying about little stuff like printers and things. And then I got to Hopkins and it was like, what? We have so much money. So the resources were a little different. But anyway, and then People's went under. Finally, it did sort of succumb to the financial problems. So, but anyway, I got into healthcare, I think that way, through caring, being interested in care for the underserved and, kind of making healthcare equity and equality a real thing. And when I got to Hopkins, the cool thing is that, for as giant and rich as Hopkins is, Hopkins medicine is doing some pretty good stuff in the arena of closing gaps and health equity and things like that. It's by no means a perfect organization, and there probably are no such organizations. But this is so I got to do a whole lot of the same kind of work I'd been doing at People's when I got to Hopkins. Because Hopkins wants to show that it's a good neighbor in East Baltimore. And so I got to cover and write about a lot of really cool initiatives and projects and doctors and stuff who are doing just super important work here in the city.
Now,
so that's a long way around how I got into healthcare. But
no, that's cool. Your time at Hopkins, you've seen it all, right? Like, by the time I got there, I was, so my first week was like the Zika virus.
Yeah. Right.
You seen the Zika virus. You was there doing Ebola too, right?
Yeah.
You saw the first ever, you was amongst the team seeing like the first ever HIV transplant.
Yeah.
The penis transplant.
Right.
Obviously COVID. What would you say that's one of the things you noticed in the evolution of the coverage and how people write about it and talk about it, and just the evolution of communications throughout your time there?
Man, that's an awesome question. Probably like everything else in the world, or in my life anyway, there's pre-COVID and post-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I mean, it has been I'm just really happy to have been at Hopkins. So I've been here 10 years. I just got my, it's here somewhere. I just got my.
Oh, nice. We're going to do, we usually don't do this on this show, but, where is it? Oh yeah, we're going to do.
That's so funny. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I think it was just kind of, you know, it took me a couple years to just learn the ropes, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We were, you know, I appreciated the leadership that we had at the beginning, you know, Kim Hoppy and Audrey Wong. Audrey, I know Audrey's is big in your world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge fan as well.
No, she's definitely.
They just had a really good process of kind of letting the professionals do their jobs and letting us, like, okay, so you have a beat, you know, here are your beats in the hospital and in the med school and stuff. And, you know, it's up to you to identify the interesting stories, right? And then to write press releases and to publicize them. So, I mean, I was just kind of kept my head down and did that kind of stuff for a little while. But then, you know, Brian, I can't recall if you were there at Hopkins. Yeah, you were there for Freddie Gray. You were there.
I was the year before. That was the year before I got there.
Okay.
I was in Connecticut. Remember I told you the ESPN stories? Watching
I do now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that now. I do. And it was a heavy thing because I had brought my parents. My dad came up. I had brought my dad to Hopkins because he had prostate cancer, and he went through treatment, like 3 months of treatment, and they stayed on campus at Hopkins in the Hackram and Pat's house in these little apartments. And I mean, naturally, I was really, really worried about my dad and kind of preoccupied with his, you know, all that stuff. And then, you know, we happened to be in DC. Our group happened to be in DC for at the National Press Club for the Science Writers Boot Camp on the day of Freddie Gray's funeral. And I was on the train. I remember we were on the train back, and I was sitting with Vanessa McMains and a couple other people, and we were looking at our phones and going like, you know, man, what a great day we just had in DC, and the whole thing was great. And we're looking at it, and it was like, whoa, did you see this? Are you seeing it? Are you seeing it?
Wow.
And then you could see from the train a couple, you know, when the train comes out of the tunnel a little bit, you know, when you're coming into Baltimore, you could see the smoke coming from North Avenue. And we got off the train, and all the cab drivers, this was a little bit before Uber. All the cab drivers at the train station were like, I mean, there suddenly, like, all this media from DC was getting off our train and running over to taking all the cabs. And the cab drivers were like, nope, I'm not taking you there. I just came from there, and, you know, I'm not doing. So it was, I mean, that changed everything as far as I'm concerned, for kind of the way that we do communications at Hopkins. We just really, really changed focus. And so I just think the evolution, even before COVID, the Freddie Gray stuff became so important. I mean, I don't even mean to trivialize it by calling it the Freddie Gray stuff.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, but because you and I are friends, but I don't want to, you know, make anybody think that it's not serious. But so it was. I think that our whole focus and kind of our priorities changed a little bit, and so, you know, all through the difficulties there, and just kind of the upheaval in the city. And then when COVID, you know, now 4 or 5 years later, when COVID hit, I mean, I said, I've done a lot of stuff in my career, and you said I've done a lot of stuff in my career, but truly, man, that was the hardest. The COVID thing was the hardest challenge and I was doing it from here. This is my house. I was doing it from here, but still, you know, the just enormous loss, you know, 1.1 million people, and all the uncertainty that we had, and all the uncertainty, and, you know, just worrying for family and worrying
Yeah.
for our colleagues, and knowing that, the people that we cover and the doctors and nurses and friends we've made at the hospital are like seriously in harm's way.
Yeah.
It was just a lot, it was a lot. So, I mean, it was, but on the other side of that, we suddenly, because of a lot of shaky information that was coming from government about COVID, and I don't need to get into that, but suddenly people were looking to us. I was, our media team was right at the very crux of this stuff with the dashboard. And I mean, we had experts. You were there too, man.
Yeah.
I mean, we had the experts that that everybody wanted. So, when they started splitting it up week to week, and maybe you and I would handle a week, and I would maybe, Rachel and somebody else would, I mean, we are hooking up, BBC in the middle of the night, trying to get experts. Like, I mean, it was heavy, and it was, that was a good 18 months of that, man. It was full throttle. It was full throttle, man.
Yeah. Them emails, sending out those emails, the weekends. Yeah, it was definitely a lot. It was doing more work at home essentially than we was in the office.
Yeah. Yeah. I still am. I feel like I still am. It's all changed because the day we had to say goodbye to Mr. Waters was a sad day indeed. And I am not blowing smoke either. I'm serious. That was a big loss for us, though. It's clearly the right move. But that's when I thought, like, okay, time for me to start thinking about maybe moving to another team. I don't want to leave Hopkins or leave communications, but this media thing is starting to fry me a little bit. And I feel like, I've been doing media relations since I left the newspaper. So, and that's a lot of years ago. So I thought, like, all right, maybe it's time to just try to focus on the writing thing. And I'm lucky to have bosses and editors who are like, okay, then we'll make that happen. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. It's really been a great kind of career highlight, I think, the last 10 years to get to work at Hopkins. For, one, because it's Hopkins, but two, because of the people and the friends I've met, you and so many others.
Talk about the book, man.
Okay.
Right. Now this is also, you wrote a book before. I'm halfway through it. The baseball book, which is so cool. Just as somebody who is a baseball fan and then knows you and knows how much you love baseball, that's really cool to see, that put into a story. But now, you transition, this is the one about athletes and diabetes, right? Yeah. And I remember when you told me about this, I'm being excited. So I can't wait to check it out. But how did this come about? What made you what made this pique your interest and actually go through with it?
Well, I mentioned a few minutes ago that we all had beats when we were when we got to Hopkins, and endocrinology, gastroenterology, and a couple other ologies were my beats. And I didn't know anything about any of them. Truly, I don't I'm happy to report that I don't have diabetes, but if I get it, I'll know what to do now because I worked on this book. But one of the docs that I work with a lot, Dr. Rita Kalyani, she is a legend, man. She is. She like kind of literally wrote the book on how to care for diabetes. She wrote the American Diabetes Association's standard of care in like 2021 or so. I shouldn't say what year because I forget exactly, but and also much published. Much, really, really a big deal in the field. And she's also just like so many people at Hopkins who are big enough deals professionally that they could be personally snobs.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, right? She's not, like, she's a really regular person. So she asked me, she was like, "Hey, I've been thinking about a project, and I wonder if you want to work on a project with me." I was like, "Yeah, that'd be great. It's an honor to be asked." So she and Dr. Mark Corriere are also friends, and he's an adjunct at Hopkins, but man, what a career he's had. He's also an endocrinologist and a diabetes doctor, and he was the physician to the U.S. Congress and the Supreme Court. He was in the Navy he was an officer in the Navy for a long time, in addition to being a doctor. So yeah, I mean, he's now in private practice out in Columbia, Maryland. And so they had this idea together to, like, what if we wrote a book about athletes who have diabetes? Like, and I thought, well, that's going to be a pretty short book, isn't it? Because can you be an athlete if you have diabetes?
Yeah.
And the answer is very much yes. So, we just kind of started this journey to find as many, like, famous, professional and amateur, not so famous athletes who have diabetes, and interview them and see what it's like, see how they manage it. And we found we just heard some absolute stunners of stories. I mean, just like, what,
Wow.
we have an Olympic swimmer, Gary Hall Jr., who, if you watch the Olympics in, starting in Atlanta and then Sydney and then wherever the next one was, but Sydney was his big one.
Okay.
This guy's won a lot of medals. He's a swimmer. He's won gold medals individually and in relay. After his first Olympics, which was in Atlanta, where he was very young, but he was a hot shot. He won a gold and I think a bronze. But he was really going to be big. He was going to be huge in Sydney. But like a year and a half or so after Atlanta, he was training for Sydney, started feeling sick, started getting run down, didn't understand it, like thirsty all the time, peeing all the time, feeling sick, couldn't get out of bed. And there's a real dramatic story that he has about, how he discovered it, and how he discovered that he had type 1 diabetes, and he was diagnosed when he was, I guess, 19 or something, maybe 20. And how he overcame it to, then win more gold medals in the Olympics and stuff. Everybody thought, like, nah, I mean, his endocrinologist was like, "No, you can't do that anymore. You can't be an Olympic swimmer with this disease." And we have so many stories like that. We have Jason Johnson, who was the first big leaguer to wear an insulin pump on the field. He pitched for the Orioles and for Detroit and for Pittsburgh and for a few other teams. We have like some mountain climbers. We have Mark Andrews from all pro tight end for the Ravens. He has type 1. We have Dominique Wilkins. We talked to him. He has type 2. And they were all just really, really awesome and candid about their stories.
Yeah.
We talked to a guy who rode. This dude didn't just ride a bicycle from basically Puget Sound, Washington State to Ocean City, Maryland. Right? He didn't just ride a bicycle. He rode a fixed gear bicycle.
Wow.
Right. I'm not talking about a 20 speed or something. It was a fixie. There's one speed on that thing. And the speed is, however fast his legs would go. And it's, and the guy did it. He has diabetes, So a lot of the men and women in the book. We also have Lauren Cox, who won the national championship with Baylor women's basketball a couple of years ago. And was in WNBA and I think plays in Europe now. But a lot of them said, I don't have I'm succeeding. I'm not succeeding, in spite of having diabetes. I'm succeeding because I have diabetes. And it's like, wow. yeah, this guy Sebastian Sasseville, who I mean, the same kind of thing. Like he walked across he walked across the South Pole. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Like, what? Are you kidding me? He said, I'm lucky. I have a disease. I have a chronic, lifelong disease that forces me to be healthy and forces me to pay attention to my health. And I'm like, well, I guess that's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody does look at it that way, but yeah, it was a lot of fun to write, and it was so the structure is sort of the stories, these athletes' stories, kind of get broken up, and at the end of at the end of each section, there's a long part that my colleagues, Doctors Kalyani and Corriere, write and kind of give expert analysis to say, like, well, okay, so this is what happens. This is what is happening to Mark Andrews' blood sugar as he's taking a big hit against the Steelers. You know what I mean? Yeah, that kind of stuff. And it's really interesting to kind of read the medicine and the science of what it all means. So it's called Winning with Diabetes, and Johns Hopkins University Press published it. It just came out last week. So we're psyched, really psyched that it's finally out.
Well, we'll definitely put the link to the book so people can check it out. Absolutely. Absolutely, man. One of the things that, one of the advices you always gave me was like, excuse me, with the sciences, it's like putting together a puzzle.
Yeah.
And discovering everything. And, hearing you talk about it, like with the book and just throughout your career, just brings back, it just kind of like brings back that conversation. Because, man, when I got thrown into the fire and I had to have, pulmonary. I had to have a pulmonary beat.
Yeah.
That was tough. Shout out to Dr. G. He was a rock star.
Yeah.
He always, and I still keep in contact with him to this day.
Dr. Galeazzados at Johns Hopkins Bayview is, man, he's our guy. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And he's a Twitter star too.
He is too, man. Yeah. I know.
He's a Twitter star. So, but it was like a lot of times I was like, all right, how do I put this together? And he would always give me great feedback between him, you, and Dr. McMains. Y'all wouldn't like rewrite what I essentially wrote.
Never.
And so that was always, like Rachel was on here several weeks ago, and we talked about like putting together in case you missed it, and
which was so good.
Thank you. I really wish that series could have kept going.
I do too.
I hope somebody picked, because I would like the idea of educating people about the stories in a short form way, and especially like people I know that will watch it just because they're in their 20s and they could get a better understanding a lot of times because they didn't have the time to read like the press release, or their job didn't necessarily call for them to read the press release, but they could watch this and like, oh, I can learn something.
It was that was such a great idea and a well executed series. I mean, it was a digest. It was I forget how long it was. It wasn't long. It was like a minute, maybe 2 minutes.
We had to keep it in Twitter time before Elon took over.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, there you go. Right. So in pre-Musk Twitter time, I mean, you used to like, kind of just like provide a cool video digest of the best stories that came out of our group for the week or two. And oh man, that was good. It's funny. I can't tell you the number of people who have told me since you left, like, man, whatever happened to that? Because that was really good.
Wow.
I was like, they're both gone now, Brian and Rachel are gone. But, we're going to, I don't know if we can, I don't want to jump the gun. There's some plans to maybe try to make something,
I'm available for consultations.
Good.
I'm pretty sure me and Rachel could work out something. We could consult on the project. Help them out. Hopkins got money.
I know that's right. Yeah. Well,
but before we get out of here, man, I gotta ask you this question. I always ask everybody: when you look back over your career, When was the moment you broke through the glass ceiling? When you realized like you were doing exactly what you're supposed to do, and essentially you were good at it.
Oh, wow. Man, I love that. Well, you know, I think, like I said before, I got to acknowledge that my glass ceiling was thinner than an awful lot of people's glass ceilings. So let me just start there. But you know, a few things come to mind. But honestly, you know, I think it really wasn't until I got to Johns Hopkins and I started writing stories for this publication called Dome and for Johns Hopkins Magazine, Johns Hopkins Medicine Magazine, and some other things like that. That where people that I really respected and really whose opinions meant a lot to me, and whose work was really impressive, but hard to translate. Right? That when they told me, man, you know, I really liked what you wrote because because you were able to crystallize you were able to crystallize the kind of research that we do and the kind of like clinical kaboom stuff that we do into words and language that people understand. It really wasn't until that happened that I thought, like, you know what, because that's what I wanted to do. That's what I've really wanted to. You want to write stuff that people read and get something from, you know, and if somebody can go, wow, okay, cool, I understand that now. You know, I mentioned a minute ago, and I don't want to go on and on, but I mentioned a minute ago that I worked at an ad agency for a while to try to make some money, and it didn't work out very well. I say make some money. I mean, you know, we make okay salaries, but when you go into that world, you make big money. And I thought for a long time in my career, I thought I had to try to be somebody other than who I really am. You know, I thought I had to talk a certain way or be a certain way or, you know, project a certain kind of, you know, professional thing, but it was fake. You know what I mean? And I thought like, that was hard. It wore me out. Like at the end of the day, you think like, okay, which guy am I supposed to be? Am I home guy or am I work guy now? And if you can make work guy, you're the same guy you are, and the person that you think people like and that your friends like, you know, make that happen. Be that person at work, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't be serious, you know, but be yourself. And, you know, if being yourself in your workplace is not okay, then you're probably in the wrong workplace. And that's, you know,
that's a bar right there.
I mean it. How many times have you interviewed for a job and, you know, you had to like sit and be somebody that, you know, and you think like, gee, I hope I get the job. But in the back of your mind, you think like, yeah, but I kind of didn't like that. I don't like that guy too much or that person who's the boss. You just got to be yourself. And, you know, I think that's how you get, that's one step in the direction of being happy in your career.
Man, I definitely appreciate that, man. And appreciate you coming on today.
My pleasure.
You know, you definitely dropped some gems, especially with that one. You had a walk-off grand slam.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, walk off. That feels good. That might be my first walk off ever.
I mean, hey, it's like Chris Hoyle's back in 96. I remember that vividly. Vividly, just because I just came home from church and A-Rod had hit a grand slam earlier. This is when he was a baby face, as we say in wrestling. Now he's a heel, and he's been a heel.
He's a heel, yeah, he is. Yeah.
And then Hoyles hits the grand slam, and I got a chance to tell him that he was at the car show, and I said, "Hey, man, you know, I'm a big fan of yours, and I remember the day you hit a grand slam when your son was born." And
yeah,
he's like, "Thank you, I appreciate that."
That's awesome. I remember it went over the center field fence. You remember it?
Yep.
I mean, I could see it. It was one of those like I think that's got a chance. It wasn't like he didn't like rip it and like that's gone immediately.
Yeah.
He hit it. It was like, oh, I think that's carrying, and it just kept going. Yeah,
Orioles would beat the Mariners 14-13. And see, like the Mariners was always like my second favorite team because of Ken Griffey Jr.
Yeah.
But especially like when that happened, it was like, you know, y'all good, but I always wanted the games to be competitive, but not too competitive. It would suck because years later, the Mariners, when they hit the Orioles, I was at ESPN and I was actually working with Dan Duquette Jr. And we were sitting there like, and this when his dad was GM, was like, yeah, this looks like it's gonna happen. He's like, you want to make a graphic for it? I'm like, okay.
That was the least enthusiastic no-hitter graphic in the history of
ESPN. Exactly.
That's great.
But man, let the people know where they can find you.
Hey, I'm at Smitty at Hopkins on Twitter. That's an easy one. Just would love to hear from you. And and the book is available at Amazon and all other places like that. It's the paperback, I think, is like $21. It's called Winning with Diabetes. It's full of athletes that you've heard of and a few that you haven't heard of. If you've been diagnosed recently or not even too recently, or if a family member or something, we think maybe it might help sort of let you know that diabetes doesn't have to send you to the bench.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, Patrick Smith, make sure y'all check him out. Check out his work too. Check out the book. Look, you can Google him and put Johns Hopkins Medicine. You can see some of the cool stories he's written.
Make sure you put Johns Hopkins in there because there's a lot of Patrick Smiths in the world.
Facts.
Yeah, like a lot of Brian Waters.
That's why I make people put the H.
Because there's only one Brian H.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, remember, do not let anybody place a ceiling above your success. So long, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. You can support this podcast by going on foryourwear.com. Go to personalities and see Brian H. Waters. There you can get Breaking Through Glass Ceilings t-shirt or a hoodie, as well as a No Ceilings Above Success t-shirt. Go to foryourwear.com. Make sure you also check out some of the other podcasters and professional wrestlers as well.